Hello, I'm Mark Gait and I'm Head of Customer Service for O2. I've been doing that role for the last 2.5 years. And today I've been at the cinema here just talking about O2's experience, our customer journeys over the last 6 or 7 years, how we've brought on digital capability to complement what we already do from a web chat and voice perspective. We're hugely proud that we have been voted for the last 7 years as the most satisfied customers when it comes to an Ofcom report. And that's what we've been talking about today. Good morning, everybody. So I've got 7 slides. One of them is my name, so I hope I'll get that one right. Mark Gait, Head of Customer Service, as you say. I've been with O2 Telefonica for 6 years now, and I've had the privilege of being Head of Customer Service for our consumer and business customers for just over 2 years, as Mark mentioned. But what I'm going to do this morning is, I guess I'll take you back a little bit to probably when I first joined O2 and where we were. And I want to then just take us through the journey so far, which will cover a little bit about our digital transformation as well as the customer journey side of things. So starting off, fairly familiar, where we were 6 years ago in terms of the channels that were available to our customers, and I'm sure it was very similar for other networks as well, is that the only way really you could talk to us as a customer was actually via the contact centres themselves. So when you look at what other avenues or channels that were really available, there was email, but that was hours and days for customers to talk to us. We didn't have web chat, or it was a twinkle in somebody's eye 6 years ago. It certainly didn't have any kind of scale. And when we look at the .co.uk type of website help and self-serve, again, nothing of any significance going on in that space, and actually the app world was almost not really in play at all. So we were wholly reliant upon customers calling us in the contact centre. And I guess the significance for us, and there was a few catalyst moments when we realised that this model really needed to change. And for those of you who remember that one, that's the iPhone 4. So for us, this was a catalyst moment because we had at this time around 22 million customers in totality across our consumer and business side of things. We were taking, when that one launched, 1 million voice calls a week. And that's the type of propensity to call that we were experiencing. So a few gasps in the room at that, but that's the nature of what we were dealing with. So that was something that we realised is just not sustainable. It's not sustainable from a customer point of view, and it's not sustainable from a cost point of view. We had 4 big contact centres of our own, wholly owned by O2, and around about 3,000 FTE with a number of outsourced partners to help us service our customers on a daily basis. So that was really, I guess, the moment for us where something had to change. And we realised the consequences I've just described of not changing would be spiralling costs and poor customer dissatisfaction. One of the other catalysts, I think, that happened around about that time, and again, I'm still back in 5 or 6 years ago at this moment in time, was the first thing we did was we brought the sales and service directorates together. So previously they were siloed. We had a service director and a sales director, and we recognised that actually the customer journeys themselves were blended more and more. Customers weren't seeing the difference in some of these interactions that they wanted to have with us. And having that under one directorate, so for the first time, it sounds really basic, but the conversations in that directorate changed because we had our online colleagues were part of that, our stores colleagues were part of that, and the contact centres themselves were part of that as well. So that was revolutionary in itself because we weren't working in silo, we were actually working collaboratively on behalf of the customer as a result of that change. And what we also had there was we had executive endorsement of some of the challenges that the customer had in that way. So that was really significant. So we began a journey then. One of the first things that we did was to give a customer, I guess, another choice in terms of the channel that they could operate. So web chat was born. And web chat was born really, and test and learn, and we scaled that. And over the number of years, we continued to scale that and add other things into the web chat functionality to make it a significant channel. I'll come on to numbers again in a minute. If you remember that million calls I mentioned, our web chat service now on a weekly basis will do for sales and service around about 180,000 web chats. Now that wasn't an immediate success. We grew that over time, and I guess that'll be one of the learnings to talk about today was to do that test and learn process. And the other learning was we probably expected it to happen overnight sometimes. So we would forecast for those customers to go and use those services. but the customer adoption of those services were behind the curve. We typically saw 6 to 12 months it would take for those things to happen. So we might build it and the capability might be there, but customers still weren't coming. Eventually, through word of mouth and an understanding of those sort of services being available, button visibility and trial and testing various things, we saw that grow. I guess the next stage of that was MyO2, which is an application. So as the birth of smartphones became really real and the capability was there, we saw the growth of the app. And we've got an app called MyO2. And what that enabled us to do, along with .co.uk, was to really look at some of the kind of self-service capability that we could have, which was, again, is now a significant channel for our customers. So that takes us kind of an ongoing process over the last 4, 5, 6 years, where we now have large channels of choice for our customers. I guess what it did for us, and I'll talk to you about numbers in just a moment in terms of where we are, so you can understand the scale of what we now operate and how we operate the operating model at this point in time. But I guess what it left us with actually was other choices, because we found ourselves with 4 big contact centres, still multiple outsourced partners, and actually too many people and not enough work. Because of the successes that were going on, the call volume was declining year on year. So that's really good because it made it easier for customers, but we faced some real dilemmas from a people point of view. We had a choice to go alone ourselves and continue running those contact centres, or do we partner with somebody who can help us to do that? And our model now is we have got a 10-year partnership agreement with Capita, who operate about 80% of our contact centre functionality and web chat. We're 3 years into that agreement with them, and it's still going really successfully. I guess in addition to that, and one of the challenges that helped us with was clearly there's going to be a commercial aspect to that as well. So it helped us with that side of things. But in particular, the investment in contact centre services. We were always competing with the networks and things like that. And so therefore, with the growth of data, it was very, very hard to get the CapEx invested that was required in new technology for the contact centre. That agreement pretty much helped us to do that. So, where are we now? Well, that tells us that these channels are bigger than voice now. So remember that 1 million calls that I talked about. So we now, on an average weekly basis, take about just under 450,000 calls. And I expect that to continue to decline. I'll talk about exactly where I think that will go over the next 2 to 3 years. We still continue to do about 180,000 web chats. As I say, we've done that probably for the last year or two. I think for us, web chat as a channel will remain a significant part of our estate. What we expect to happen, though, with web chat in itself is probably to get a bit more sophisticated than it is. We still have, certainly in our business customer service, some journeys that start there and end with a phone call. And that's just not acceptable from an ease point of view for a customer. I'm sure Joe talked about at the start of the morning how the telco industry sometimes isn't easy to do business with. Well, we still have some examples of those things going on right now. So that's what I mean by we definitely need to make sure that our web chat becomes more sophisticated. And I guess our biggest channel now is MyO2, so the app. The app allows you to do lots of different things, self-serve effectively, so you could check your bill. In the old days, that would be checking your minutes and texts. You check your data allowance. You can see when your next upgrade is going to happen, and you can make changes to your tariff, and you can do all sorts of things that previously, that would have been a voice contact. So more and more, and it is about customer choice, and that's an important point I'll come on to towards my summary, but more and more it's about choice. But the contact center, the voice contact center, the traditional way of doing business with us is the place where we deal with the most complex queries for our customers, almost the last resort type of thing. And the other places are where it's more easier to do business with us in that way. So a huge change in that way. And I guess if I just go on to where I think the future will be, so where does that end? What does it look like in 3 years' time? I guess that's one of the responsibilities that me and my team have. I still see that that voice reduction will continue. So I think over the next 3 years, that 450,000 calls a week that I see, I could see another 30% of decline. And that's based on a number of different things. That will be some efficiencies, some operational efficiencies and things like right first time getting better. But it's also about capability as well. It's about what else can we do for customers that they might want to do for themselves if we can get that kind of thing happening either on .co.uk or MyO2. And to give you an example of those 14 million interactions I talked about, just to give you the scale and the opportunity, a lot of this is still about adoption of the existing things you can do. That's about 4.5 million users, unique users. 14 million interactions, but 4.5 million unique users a month. So there's still a lot to go after with the current adoption rates in that way, and that's one of the priorities that we'll have. So I definitely see, as I say, we will definitely see that, that call volume reduction continue in that space. And I would see definitely the growth of the MyO2 app just continuing to have that kind of success we've just described. I think the other one of interest for us at the moment is social media. So social media we do it from a brand perspective, and we also do it from a customer service perspective when we spot things that are going on that we can help the customer with. We don't do it at a huge scale at the moment, but we're very present. So I would say roughly around 7,000 to 8,000 interactions proactively every single week. I expect that to grow by probably 300%, and I would probably use only a year to 18 months in terms of the timescales for that to happen. I guess it's ignore it at your peril, really would be my advice on that one. And I guess it feels like when you look at who's doing what in that world, the rules have not yet been written. You see some people doing 15 minutes, you see some people taking 7, 8 hours. But that's certainly something that we believe is going to grow, is just a way that customers want to interact with us and have their query resolved. We need to pluck those things out of those particular channels of social media. So I guess if I was to summarize really where this is going, and again, to sort of always try and think around how this could help your organizations, and in that way, I guess what I would say is the catalyst moments were those moments when you just think, this is crazy, 1 million calls. The directorates coming together was hugely significant for us because it gave us executive sponsorship, and I would point towards that being the moment that we really changed the way that we behaved actually as an organization, and still to this day continue to do so. I think that test and learn ability, constantly looking at what would work within web chat, what would work within those channels of like MyO2, what would be the best way that we can approach this to help our customers. And I guess the other point I referenced at the end was it really is about customer choice. I go to many of these sorts of things and people talk about the death of voice and that you don't need contact centers anymore. That's, for me, nonsense. The customer has to have the choice. So we want to make it as easy as possible for that customer. And a lot of that time means that they will self-serve, or they don't need to call you in the first place. That would be your best outcome. But they might want to self-serve, or they might want to web chat because they're on the go in that way and it's easier for them. Make those choices. But if they want to talk to us, we absolutely should be available for them and continue to do so. And that might be about more complex queries. We've got our guru population. Or it might be about, a complex bill. But regardless of what it is, the voice channel will remain an important part of that ecosystem for us. And I think the other challenge for us as an industry is actually probably with the things that Joe would have been referencing. So we've done a lot of work with Joe just to try and understand where the telco industry is. And I'm sure when you heard Joe talking about these things, it's not a particularly brilliant space, because we are, at the moment, in the relegation zone, aren't we, as a sector. So whilst I can talk about all of these wonderful things that we do, and we can be really proud of those things in the journey so far, it's not acceptable when you talk to customers who have other experiences in other industries, and they would tell you it's much easier to do business with them. And that's the challenge for me in the next few years, but I think broader than O2, is a challenge for the telco industry, that's just not an acceptable place that any of us should want to remain. So that was pretty much my whistle-stop tour of the 5 or 6 years.